You're listening to Partnernomics Podcast, where we discuss the art and science of developing successful strategic partnerships. To learn more about the suite of Partnernomics solutions, visit partnernomics.com.
Well, welcome back to another episode of Partnernomics Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Brigman. I have Tyler Pittman with me as usual. Tyler, what's going on, brother?
Been a long time.
It's been a little
bit, yeah.
Dude, I've been busting out a bunch of these different interviews with folks across the country. And so It's been a little while since we've been here in the studio. And we have invited Mr. Tom Wisnasky to come back. Tom, what's going on, man?
How are you guys?
Good. Hey,
Good
so
to
we
be back.
said that we would have you back as soon as we had the IPA, our beer that we brewed. Gosh, what do we do that? Probably 5 weeks ago now, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
But we got it bottled 2 weeks ago, week and a half, 2 weeks ago.
Week and a half, yeah.
Yeah. And so it is sufficiently carbonated. So we had Tom come in the house and do some testy test on it. Tom, let's kick this thing off.
Let's christen this. Hold on.
Somebody give us a drum roll. That's loud enough.
All right, let's see. Let's see how good these mics are.
Ooh, I can hear that over here.
Oh,
We'll see if it
That
picked it
sounded
up.
So
Special.
the style is a West Coast IPA. So it's pretty dark, relatively dark, and this one isn't real hoppy.
Tom, you'll like one of the hops that we had put in there was actually from Yakima, where I played baseball
no kidding.
last summer. Yeah.
That is super
What,
cool.
Mark? What's the stat on that? They produce 75%
It's definitely the majority
of the world's hops.
No kidding.
in the U.S.
U.S. Sorry.
Yeah, but it is the place for.
All right, let's
Yeah.
give
hops
her
in
a
the
rip
US.
and see what she's all about. Well,
We're getting all the sound effects.
That's right.
she's cold. You're right. She's not real hoppy. She's hoppy, but not back
Not
of the
pucker
throat
your
hoppy,
face.
right?
Yeah.
And she's dark. If I hold it up to the light, she's even a little darker than a Killian's Red, which
Yeah.
Killian's not really known as being a real hoppy beer,
Right.
but that's kind of the color.
Color.
it's-
Kind of
I
has that
see.
malt.
Yeah, kind of a reddish brown. Oh man, how many you got in the fridge?
We got about 50 of them, don't
Might
we?
be
Yeah.
a fun
I think
afternoon.
it's over 5 gallons worth.
So that was your size, 5
Yeah.
gallons, and oh
Yep.
wow, so that gave you 4 cases ish.
Ish. Yep.
Yeah.
Hot dang.
Do you like
I
that
it.
one or the previous one?
So the previous one was the Farmhouse Ale.
Yeah. A little easier drink, but
I
I don't know. This is a relatively
This has gotta be-
easier
This is a
IPA.
very mild IPA.
This
Yeah.
has got some good taste to it.
Yeah, really
Now,
good flavor.
I did on our last one, the Farmhouse Ale, smooth as silk, right?
Yeah.
But then remember the second one we did, we kind of did a half and half
mix.
mixture.
Yeah.
But so this one if I would line them up, the 3 of them up, I would put, left to right from smooth to increasing in hoppiness. I would say the Farmhouse Ale would come first. This one would come in the middle. And that other one that we did the half and half with,
Yeah.
I don't remember the name of that one.
It was the Goose Island IPA. Or no, it wasn't. It was I can't remember. Mom had brought the case home.
Yeah.
It was a pretty hoppy IPA, but it wasn't that high percentage,
Okay.
but it was
Lagunitas?
pretty.
It was one of the other
No,
ones? Okay,
it was a
gotcha.
green can, but pretty high IBU.
Okay.
On a real hot summer day, I would probably prefer a handful of the Farmhouse Ale.
Yeah.
On an evening, chill, sitting around, relaxing, I would do the West Coast IPA, if that's
Yeah.
what we're calling it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or is that what you guys would call it, rather? I can't call me we. I guess because I'm part of the taste
you're
group.
part of the team.
I'm
That's
part of the
right.
test study. I
You're
can we.
You're the R&D department. That's a nice job, isn't it?
I wouldn't mind that. In fact, please put that in my title.
Absolutely.
I don't know if we're going to call this the Partnernomics Brewery, but if we call it that, I'm definitely going to be on the R&D team.
Well, if we keep on pumping these out, man, we got to have somebody test it.
That's right. I'm in. You got me whenever you need me.
Where's the opener? Can I borrow that?
sorry,
bad
I
boy?
didn't mean
Thank
to-
you.
Bogart that on you.
No, you're good. All right, man. So what are we going to talk about today?
We are talking IoT, correct?
Yeah.
A little
The-
Internet of Things.
The Internet of Things. I've heard it called IoT. I've called it IOE, Internet of Everything. It's about this wild world that is evolving and everything being connected.
I think IOE is more fitting for nowadays, wouldn't you say?
Well, yeah, like it is. I mean, the other day, we bought a new house, not new, but different to us 4 months ago. You know, we got a Samsung refrigerator, and, there's an app I can connect to the refrigerator. And you know what? It tells me there's an option. Do I want to just have the filters sent directly to my house when they're done with their 6-month cycle? Or do I want to be notified with a text message or an email when I need to do a replacement? Okay, that's a pretty easy paradigm shift for me to accept. In the other ideas of IoT, I have smart switches in my house, and I can say, Alexa or Google Home, whichever happens to be your platform of choice, turn off countertop lights, and bling, they're done. You can set up routines when you go to bed at
and
night.
Thermostat and lights, camera, security systems.
There's all kinds of devices that as humans we can interact with that to some, those front of the plow type of guys and gals that are like, hey, I'm going to consume everything I can that's new, and they're willing to pay the premium for these new sort of cool on the edge devices. But I would say those front of the plow folks are the much smaller percentage of the human population that want to dive into this technology infused world.
Kind of these early adopters. I've heard somewhere 10 to 15%.
Yeah.
Is going to be kind of the gadget geeks that will jump into that.
Yep.
Do you fall into that category?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, I'm kind of like right on the edge. I'm probably like, if it's 10%, I'm probably like 11%. I'm just right behind the wave, I think.
Right on that fence.
Yeah.
So interestingly enough, I'm in thought cycle and desire, I'm 2%. I'm like, show me all the new cool stuff. But then when I see the price tag of the new stuff, I'm like,
well, that's it. I mean, the early adopters, man, they pay the freight.
Yeah.
They do.
They
end up paying for all the R&D dollars.
Yeah.
Which, as the R&D guy for a beer company, I'm good with that.
Yeah. And we can do that with beer. We have a pretty low failure rate on our product.
Yeah.
So we're pretty solid with that.
Cost of operations is
But
low.
man, I get annoyed whenever stuff doesn't work.
Oh.
So I'm not a very good first 10% tester. That's
give
why I'm
me an
at the
example
11
of
to
that,
15.
then.
What's that?
Like, give me an example of that. So this actually, let me extract out of your head, because one of the things that I want to really understand more about is how does the human psychology tie itself to the dependency and trust in technology?
Yeah.
So that failure moment that you go through, and I'm not saying that you're a test case that might apply to everyone, but you are a test case. What is in that frustration or in that challenging moment? What could you see as the cause?
So where my head's at, or my frame of reference, is probably mostly in software, right? A lot of what we do with our platforms and all of with our learning management systems and all these cool Google tools and web apps, you have these opportunities to test drive something early, right? Jump into the alpha betas. And I guess, I've done that a couple times and been bit and had issues, like serious issues, right? Where it deletes and kind of kills some of the stuff that you really needed, that you used to have.
Okay.
And so, I don't know, I'm just a little bit gun shy on that. I want to at least make sure there's 1 or 2 versions out before I hop into that. I don't know. I want my stuff to work. So
you're talking about that that early adopter, as you called it, kind of alpha and beta test group, right? And I think there's, in this world of IoT, kind of keeping our thread on that angle, there was a lot of that stuff going on. I would say even as early as 7, 8, 9 years ago, where, you could, let me stop and think, door locks, for example, Slage and some of the other, I can't think of the other large manufacturers of door handles and locks, but you could go in and, push a 5-digit code and motorized little deal would open up your deadbolt, and hey, where you were, you didn't need a key anymore, right? Now it's like, you can buy them, whereas if an authorized device is close enough to that bad boy, it opens automatically. Now that gets into the software frustration that you're talking about, right? So now I got to be smart enough to go into the administrative console and say, hey, this device that is my Android or my iPhone, whatever it happens to be, you have to register that as a trusted device to now work with that machine to give me access to my home. That requires a whole different level of knowledge by the user. And that's the category that you just talked about where it becomes very, very frustrating. So now let's parlay that or leapfrog that into something that might be a little bit more sensitive, and that is the whole life and death aspect of how IoT or devices play into the healthcare vertical, right? So use cases I have are, my father-in-law has a pacemaker. That bad boy, as soon as he puts his phone next up to it, it can transmit all of the X number of days in the past, and they can start to develop patterns of what's going on within his heart rhythm. They can adjust his medications appropriately if he's in an incident, or they can smash it up against a database, kind of like we were talking about earlier, of other people that have a similar condition. And then maybe there's a test group going on somewhere.
Do some predictive
work. Do some predictive work, right? So here's how I like to look at IoT in the medical field. It's taking what has traditionally been a very reactive market and now made it a predictive and more scalable.
Let's give a bunch of people some pills and see if they die or if they get better.
Right. Let's do something, test the results, then tweak, again. So it kind of takes the scientific method to a whole new level.
Right.
And makes it much more precise.
Because you're able to get real-time data from basically an infinite number of observations. As many patients as you have. With the mobile device, and maybe we'll get into the whole 5G and having even more and more bandwidth, where that is no longer the limiting factor.
It's not the limitation.
I mean, just like you, I've been involved in technology forever, and whenever, as we were talking about, I like things to work, but I've spent my whole career working on products that were still a thought.
Correct.
And working through that, I'm thinking all the way back to 15 plus years ago, whenever we were standing up Wi-Fi networks.
Yep.
And trying to do authentication and automatic authentication and across multiple devices and then bringing that to phones, not just laptops, through PCMCIA cards that you jammed in the side of your laptop, right? I'm geeking out a little bit with you. Yeah. But now going to phones.
I haven't heard that acronym in forever.
I know, it has been.
Impressed.
See, I told you.
I'm impressed. You got this.
I told you. But now cars.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I just got
Autonomous.
a new rig, got a couple of new rigs out there in the driveway, and so the old F-150, I connected to my home system so that it could download new software for the truck.
That connects and talks to your electronic control module?
Yep.
So you do firmware updates that way?
Yep.
Oh, Tommy likey. That's okay. So now we're okay. So we talk about automotive. We talked briefly about logistics too, and the whole. So there's so many. There's a handful of vertical markets that can absolutely be looked at as nowadays probably even codependent on technology, not just reliant upon it, but very codependent.
Everything is dependent on technology.
If you want to compete, I feel like.
So much of it, dude. I mean, we were talking about, Tyler just got some new investments in some stocks, right? So General Motors signed a new partnership with
Nikola,
right?
Really?
Tyler got in at the good time on that one.
Yeah.
And they're going to, and I just read that the other day. Tell me about that. So how did you come across that?
Well, so I had bought into a warrant prior to the deal being in place, and then exercised the warrants and had made a little money. Well, then once they announced I think it was a $2 billion deal with GM, GM now owns 11% of Nikola. I mean, it jumped the stock, what I'd say 50% in a day.
Yeah.
So,
so what do they do exactly? I know kind of roughly what
Nikola?
Nikola,
Yeah.
well, they're producing the Badger, which is an electric truck, but they're also doing electric semis and trash trucks, and some company
That's
put
amazing. Something that heavy, man.
Yeah, and they had
they're going head to head against what Elon is doing
with Tesla,
over at Tesla.
right? And there's a difference in the battery making or the fuel cells and what they're running off, but they're all electric, and they claim that Nikola's are going to have better mileage before they need a charge or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I know Nikola had a deal with, I don't remember the company name, but for like a couple thousand garbage trucks. And these things run at like a minimum of 500,000. So it was a multi-billion-dollar deal.
Yeah.
And this is before they're even in production, but man, it fluctuates that stock price like crazy.
It's going to be so interesting to look back in a year or 2 or 3 and just see what that world looks like.
Oh yeah.
You know?
So I love the name because in history there was a guy by the name of Nikola Tesla
Mm-hmm.
who was very playing with electrons and electricity has always been a little bit of a I'm a DIYer. Plumbing, no problem. I can knock it out. You need me to dig a trench and do some landscaping, no problem.
But 110, 120, 220 kind of bites you a little bit.
Yeah.
So here's the story. My dad worked in the oil industry, and Amoco Oil, Standard Oil. Then he unfortunately wasn't with the BP acquisition, but he was what was called he supported all the local the gas stations when they used to be called service stations, right? So they would do brake work.
When they actually used to pump your gas for you.
Right. right. Or, hey, you need a brake job, you need a muffler job, whatever. Well, those stations used to carry these big old, what I called, I was like, Dad, you firing up the torpedo today? It was this like 4-foot long kerosene heater that looked like a dang torpedo. And what started it was you plugged it into a 220 connection, and that was the heating element mechanism that fired it up, and the kerosene started to burn, right? Little Tommy one day got his first feel of what 220 felt like when he accidentally had his finger on the plug as it was put into the receptacle. Yeah, rocked me a little bit.
That's a lot of juice, man.
Oh, yeah.
It was a lot of juice.
Even-
I felt it in every
Oh, yeah.
centimeter of my body, down to my toes. 110 will just give you a quick little jolt. 220 steps up a little bit and gives you a little bit of more of a jump.
Oh yeah.
So that was probably at age 6 or 7. And so I've always been a little
Kind of traumatized ever since.
touchy on electricity. A little touchy.
Mark, do you remember the valve job I had with a friend's dad, with Cole's dad? Remember I worked in...
Oh, yeah.
So, Tom, I worked for a friend's dad. He manufactures valves that he sends out to companies. They put in pipelines.
Big
whatever.
industrial valves.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so I would build them. And they're pneumatic. They've got these pneumatic actuators that sit on top, and then you put a limit switch up on top. Well, you have to take the cap off and plug up the power and test them and flip a switch.
Yeah, make sure they're working.
Right. And the highest were 110 volts. And, oh, man, I shocked myself once. Let me tell you, I didn't get anywhere close to the... Because you had to make sure they weren't touching. Well, they barely touched, and woo,
Arced across and got a hold of you.
That's right. So I learned not to mess with that stuff too much.
The trust factor.
Mm-hmm.
Trust in working with electricity. So that's the thing. Let's go back to that. In what you guys do at Partnernomics, trust is a huge element, right? So all these, I should probably know the statistics, but it's in the multiples of billions of devices that, networks are going to enable. I think Verizon's got this awesome commercial now. It's like, hey, it's like a 28-lane highway, 5G referring to. And we've got the fastest global access ramp, a 5G 28-lane highway. It's not like a 2-lane dirt road. I'm like, okay, so let's really think about what that means, right? That means now I can just stuff a bunch of more cars on the highway. It's like driving in LA versus, 435 here in Kansas City. They're different widths of the highways. But going back to the trust element and being able to support all those devices that can connect on this new 28-lane highway, I don't know that mankind, that's a big psychological barrier to jump. And
yeah, trust it. It's an interesting thing, man. I want to spin this book around so you can see it. This code of trust.
The code of trust.
Trust, as you mentioned, is, and we had this thing, and we've talked about the partnership success pyramid, right? The 5 imperatives for partnership success, and the foundational element is trust.
Right.
And there's a lot of different authors that have written about it, and it intrigues me, because I think that if you can nail the trust thing, so it all comes down to people. Right? I mean, all technology, all of this stuff, every business, every product, every service ultimately comes down to people. So I think that's kind of the common denominator. And so trust it really is an interesting topic. And it's so dynamic, because you say, have a high trust organization, right? Have a high trust organization, and there's obviously this very high correlation of having a high output, company. But trust is so dynamic. Trust is so many things that goes into building trust. But yeah, to your point, especially with partnerships, this world that we live in, man, it is just becoming so complex, so interwoven, so many different pieces and components, and nobody can produce everything. We live in this world of partnership, right? We dig through all these cool announcements and press releases of new partnerships coming out. Well, there's the rate of partnerships being formed today, according to the Journal of Accountancy, it's increasing at a rate of 25% per year. Right, so you get this exponential growth of the quantity of partnerships that are being formed, and
how's the success rate correlate?
Well, that's just it. The success rate, it depends on how you define success, but generally speaking, most studies, and this is McKinsey and all of these Gartner and Forrester, that do these studies. Generally speaking, what they'll do is they look at they go back to the senior executives 2 years after the fact and say, did you accomplish the goals that you had set out for this partnership? Yes or no? And basically ask those senior executives. If both of them say yes, it was a successful partnership, put a tick in that column. If one of them, at least one of them, said no, put a failure in that. And depending on which study you look at and how you define success specifically, but the range is somewhere between 65 to 75% failure rate at a 2-year mark. So that's why we exist. And so
let's dig into that, because what I want to, I'm going to flip the mic and I'm going to ask you, because you're a guy that knows. You've done a lot of research in this area, and you can probably pinpoint the areas where these partnerships fail the most. And why I ask that is I want to try and drive why the partnerships in the specifics that you can point to why they fail, if it's the same reason why the trust is over on the topic of today, of why the trust factor in human society is not willing to build that bridge to technology. Is there correlation we can drive there?
Yeah, so I'd first like to hit on something that you said there.
Okay.
Of people's, I'm going to kind of put words in your mouth, but people's inability or unwillingness to trust technology, so it's stalling out the proliferation of technology or kind of slowing it.
Yeah.
I think back to 15 years ago, whenever a lot of us were making web purchases for the first time.
Yep.
And we all heard,
careful.
Hell no, don't do that. Don't put your credit card on there. Just
PayPal, no way. That's just a company on the Silicon Valley. We don't go there.
How many of us heard that?
All the day.
Right? All of us all day long. Dude, how many transactions do we make via the web? Or, you cruise into Quick Trip, or you go into Walmart, pop in the card.
Yep.
What's the difference? As soon as you pop it in that machine, it's going electronic and it's flying over, the cybersphere.
Correct.
And so I think it's this evolution. And so the question is, how fast? how long is it going to take? So now it's the next level. So we were talking about the whole, payments and these things, and then credit cards needing to say, well, we're automatically going to cover it. You don't have to worry about fraud. If you have a fraudulent charge, you call us up and
We'll
all
take
that kind
care
of
of
good
you.
stuff. And so now we're kind of stepping into the next phase of this, of we have all these different devices, these things that now our phone is connecting to, because now our phone is the highway.
Yep.
Our phone is
Yep.
the highway of data that's getting some server sitting somewhere, gives them the ability to aggregate this data so they can then crunch it and do whatever it is that they do with it.
So I want to draw something on. I want to step you back into the statement that you made about online credit card transactions. And I think what built the trust for a lot of folks to open up or embrace that ease of doing a transaction was there was somebody that told me, or someone that I can interact with, that said, if a problem happens, we'll take care of you. So back to a statement I've heard you make many a times, partnerships, and I think you even talked about it earlier on in this podcast. No matter what, it comes back down to relationship between people, right? So now let's fast forward. Hey, I'm cool with doing an online transaction with my, Amex, Visa, MasterCard, Discover, whatever the flavor, because I know somebody will be there to support me. But let's now open that up and broaden that a lot wider with all these newer devices that can happen. If I go home and I say, Alexa, turn on my countertop lights, and that ain't working, I can't dial 1-800-HELP.
Right.
Help me. Because I'm the guy that set it up. So how can you bust that bridge over to the trust factor to say, when it doesn't work, or if this occurs, what do I do to get support? So I'm wondering, in this space of this connected world that we're living in the psychology of trust and acceptance, if there is that missing piece, that missing piece of there's not that person on the other end of the line. Well, may they be in Malaysia or the Philippines or wherever you call for a 1-800-GET-HELP call these days. And I'm not knocking you folks for that, because, I love the fact that you subcontract out your call centers elsewhere in the world. However, I think it's a very, very, that's a big bridge to
The
build.
help and the accountability, even, it gets really, really fuzzy.
Yeah. Because self-reliance on me as me and me alone as the support mechanism is only goes so far based upon what I can pour into it of what I know.
Yeah.
You pour that, you take that example that we're talking about over into healthcare, and what we were talking about, with that, person that's suffering from diabetes that may not be having their insulin pump working properly because the two devices aren't talking and it's not measuring properly, or with my father-in-law with his, his pacemakers not keeping things ticking properly. If that fails, who does he call? Well, he can call the device. And what I want to see this next evolution in, and I don't know if 5G and the IOT evolution, I hope it's going to get it to this point, is if I'm in the middle of an incident, I don't want to make a phone call. I want the phone call to come to me.
Yeah.
Right? And that's only possible if you trust, let the barrier come down, let the data about you and what you need help with flow through the right channels, and trust that whatever subscription service or whatever you're paying, whether it be, your healthcare option, or you might even be paying a subscription-based service with the device manufacturer, whatever, but trust that. And honestly, there's only, unfortunately, one way to test it, and that is for something bad to happen and then see how it comes out. The trust is huge in the device world. I hope we're getting there. I think we're getting there.
I think it's a function of the reliability of it. I think that's a piece of it. But we were talking earlier about a service station.
Yeah.
Right? It used to be, it was a gas station, but you pulled up, They checked your oil.
Yep.
They pumped it full of gas. They would air up your tires. They would do
If you're
all of that
low on
stuff.
washer fluid, they gave you that too, no cost.
You never had to get out of the car.
Nope.
Right?
Nope.
So kind of fast forward. So what happens? We're trying to bring cost out of delivering products.
Yep.
So we start pumping our own gas. Right? Well, now we go to Walmart. We go to Target. We go to Lowe's, Home Depot. What do? We check ourselves out. Right? We check ourselves out.
That's right.
And so now you were talking about medicine earlier. Well, now it's telemedicine. Right? I got my laptop. I dial
Teledoc.
in.
Yep.
I don't have to go anywhere. Now, I mean, pretty much all of the work that we do is virtual through Zoom.
Yep.
Yep.
So we have clients all over the country, and we pop it in using Zoom.
Yep.
So the world is kind of changing, but it's changing in a way that is slowly adopting all these pieces of technology. And I think it feels like 5G is just the next evolution of that.
It's an enabler of the next chapter.
Man, this is good stuff. I want you guys to stick around. We're gonna do a part 2. We're gonna continue on with this conversation. Well, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Partnernomics Podcast. We'll see you next time.
Partnernomics Podcast is brought to you by Partnernomics. Learn how to leverage the power of partnership. To listen to more episodes of Partnernomics Podcast, visit partnernomics.com.